Welcome to True Drew Podcast, your source for all things Nancy Drew. I'm your host, Avery, and on this podcast, we'll discuss everything from the Nancy Drew books, to computer games, to movie adaptations, and TV shows. Nothing is off the table. So if you're a True Drew, you'll definitely want to tune in for this podcast. Hello, and welcome back to True Drew Podcast. If you all have been paying attention to the episode logs for the podcast, this is actually the second episode that's come out this week. Back on Monday, I released a bonus episode talking about my experiences on the latest Clue Crew trip, the Danger on Deception Island trip that was set in Seattle. I got to go on that trip at the end of June, and it was put on by nancy.drew.nerd or Hannah on Instagram. So if you want, you can check that episode out. For today's episode, I'm going to be jumping into book number 103, The Stranger in the Shadows. This book came out in 1991, and I hope you've got your scarves and your parkas ready because this book takes place in River Heights in the winter months. Which honestly, that sounds so nice right now. It's in the 90s where I live, and I'm really missing the weather in Seattle. It was so much cooler. I'm a fall girl at heart, what can I say? But we'll start by talking about this book cover. There was only one version that I could find for this book, but it shows Nancy laying on what looks like a frozen pond. There's cracks in the ice all around her. This is a direct scene from the book, but it was so funny. I posted a picture of this book in my stories a few weeks ago, and actually Hannah, nancy.drew.nerd, commented, and she was like, "Is Nancy wearing tights in the snow?" And I'm so glad that she pointed that out because I had seen that too, and I was like, what on earth? Like, why is Nancy wearing formal wear on a skating pond? Like, you should be at least wearing leggings, something thicker on your legs to keep them warm. So at that point, I had been reading the book and had gotten to this scene, so I knew why she was dressed that way. But to just look at the cover, you're like, Nancy, you were not prepared. But this happens sometimes. Nancy will be out solving mysteries, and she's not necessarily dressed for the occasion. I mean, in the classic 56 books, it was no thing for Nancy to be running around chasing villains in heels with a matching handbag. So I will say she has come a long way. We're in the 90s now, and Nancy does typically wear more practical things. But sometimes sleuthing puts you in some pretty precarious situations. But there is a tagline on this book cover, and it says, "Nancy's hot on the trail of a blackmailer, but she's walking on thin ice." So the funny cover spoof that I came up with for this book cover is Nancy's fallen and she can't get up. Or, in lieu of that one, what in the impractical footwear is going on? Because Nancy's wearing these ballet flats. Or, well, they're kind of like clogs. They have a little bit of a heel to them. But if I were to give this book cover a rating, I would probably give it 2 magnifying glasses. It's okay. Like, it doesn't really give me a firm grasp on what the story is actually about. There is kind of this sinister shadow leaning over Nancy. I guess the one thing this book cover really conveys is just Nancy's fear in that moment. Okay, so now really quickly I'll read a list of characters that we meet in The Stranger in the Shadows. So first up is Suzanne Moorely, who is a neighbor of Nancy's, Paula de Jaeger, who is an exchange student who's staying with Suzanne, Miss Hunt, who is the manager at the store at the mall called Around the World, Larry Taylor, the exchange student coordinator, Sean Devane, and I just put bad news guy in parentheses, Chief Nelson, the fire chief, Officer Brody, who is a policeman, and if you remember in the episode where we covered A Secret in Time, book 100, he was also a character in that book. Neil Galligan, who is a student, Pete, who is a pawn shop owner, and Ellen. Okay, so now really quickly I'll read a synopsis for The Stranger in the Shadows. Paula de Jaeger is a Dutch foreign exchange student staying with Nancy's neighbors, the Moorleys. Paula is smart, pretty, and popular, but something is very wrong. Lately, she's been getting mysterious phone calls, sneaking out of the house in the middle of the night, and lying to cover her tracks. Nancy wonders what dark secret the Dutch girl is trying to hide. The mystery turns sinister when fire hits the Moorley home, and the evidence points to arson. But is Paula the source of the trouble or a victim of it? Nancy must find the answer before danger strikes again. And now for a dramatically read newspaper headline synopsis. Exchange student extortion. Nancy Drew solves case involving minors. Alright, and now let's go ahead and jump into the notes that I took down for The Stranger in the Shadows. So at the beginning of this mystery, Nancy, Bess, and Nancy's neighbor Suzanne Moorely are walking through the mall. They're talking about the exchange student from the Netherlands that the Moorleys are hosting at their house. So while they're walking around, they're looking at shops and they're practicing Dutch phrases, and they're on their way to meet this exchange student whose name is Paula de Jaeger. Suzanne says Paula has been with them since August. She knows English perfectly, and Suzanne makes the comment she's just perfect in general. I sense a little jealousy here. Suzanne says that Paula's been volunteering at a boutique in the mall called Around the World. She also says Paula has been acting odd, happy one day and depressed the next. So she asks Nancy to see if she notices anything about her when they go to meet her. So on their way to Around the World, the girls stop to look at an outfit in a window of this store called Glad Rags, and Bess bemoans that she needs to lose 5 pounds. This dieting trope, it's like Bess Marvin can't get away from it. I wish they did not include this in children's books because these books are read by impressionable young girls. It's just really unfortunate. But we do get a description of what Bess is wearing in this part of the book. It says she's wearing a blue shirt that matches her eyes and a gold barrette that pulls her hair back from her face. Nancy is wearing jeans and a sweater. They're all wearing boots and have coats over their arms, and the book says it's winter and snow has been forecasted for River Heights. So the girls continue walking towards Around the World, this boutique that Paula has been working at, and Suzanne mentions that Paula has been wanting to meet the famous detective, talking about Nancy. The store has a wild window display with papier-mâché parrots and a mannequin, and when Nancy points it out, Suzanne says Paula designed it. She calls her Miss Paula Perfect, and Bess asks if she's jealous. Suzanne just says Paula made the cheerleading squad even though she's been trying out the last 3 years, and her parents keep saying Paula's grades are better than hers. Suzanne says she wishes she'd just go home already. Yeah, it sounds like Suzanne is definitely jealous of Paula. It sounds like a case of Paula getting everything that Suzanne wants. But the girls go into the store and they meet Paula, and Nancy says she looks like a model, which could be another reason why Suzanne is jealous. Suzanne says they've come to take her to dinner, but Paula says the shop is busy and she may have to meet them in a little while. But while the girls are asking Paula where she'd like to meet them to eat, she spaces out. It's almost like she's watching someone across the store. And before they can get a straight answer out of her, she quickly says she has to go help someone. So after Paula walks off, Suzanne is like, see, she acts weird. Which a part of me, I started to get kind of annoyed with Suzanne because I was like, well, Paula is at her job. Like, she's trying to work and you guys are coming and bothering her while she's at work. I wouldn't really classify her behavior as weird. She's just wanting to help a customer. But Nancy, Bess, and Suzanne start to go, but then they hear someone yell, "Stop, thief!" And Paula is wrestling with a girl at the entrance to the store who says she isn't a thief. But when Paula pulls at her jacket, they see a necklace dangling out. And Paula points out more jewelry in a hidden pocket of the jacket. So a security guard shows up just as the woman tries to get away, and he and Nancy grab her. The security guard asks Miss Hunt, the manager, if she wants to press charges, and she says yes. Paula is asked to go down to the security office in the mall to give a statement. And as the woman is led away, she says, "We'll get you for this." Everyone else in the store is congratulating Paula, including Nancy, but she brushes it off. She still seems unnerved about what the woman said. So Paula tells them they'll have to get dinner another time, and she leaves to go give her statement. As she's leaving, though, Nancy notices a tall, dark-haired guy in a blue ski jacket watching Paula, and he starts to follow her. Suzanne then makes the comment that now she can add crime fighter to Paula's list of talents. I was only a chapter or so into the book at this point, and I wanted to be like, Suzanne, girl, give it a rest. So Nancy, Bess, and Suzanne go get dinner at a place in the mall called the Eateries, which is like this food court. Bess and Suzanne go get dessert, and Nancy sees Paula walking quickly towards the mall exit. So when Bess and Suzanne get back to their table, Nancy asks Suzanne about when Paula started acting weird. She says in November. It's when Paula started working at Around the World, and she would get phone calls from this guy. Suzanne and her mom called him Mr. Mystery. So after eating, the girls go do some shopping and see a movie, and then Nancy drives Suzanne home first. According to the book, Suzanne lives a few blocks over. She's not like a direct neighbor to Nancy. After Suzanne gets dropped off, Nancy takes Bess home, and she asks Bess if she remembers who the customer Miss Hunt was waiting on was. Bess doesn't remember, but Nancy says she thinks there had to have been 2 shoplifters because they often work in teams. So while Bess gets out of the car, Nancy happens to see a bag in the floor with, and this is how the book refers to it, a compact disc. I don't remember the last time I called a CD a compact disc, but just reading the first few pages of this mystery had me going straight back to the 90s. The mentionings of malls, walking around the malls and shopping, CD-ROMs. I love it. So Nancy goes to take it back to Suzanne's, but the house is dark, so she decides to wait. Meanwhile, it's snowing. But as Nancy's about to back her car up, she sees Paula hanging from a tree over the garage, sneaking out. Paula sees Nancy about that same time, and she drops to the roof, but it's slick. She ends up sliding towards the edge of the roof. So Nancy jumps out of her car just as Paula ends up hanging from the gutter. Nancy looks around frantically for something to help Paula with, and she finds a stepladder in the garage. So she puts it directly beneath Paula and she's able to step down onto it. So naturally curious about this, Nancy asks Paula what she was doing, and she just says she came out to see the snow because they don't see it a lot in Amsterdam, and she accidentally locked herself out of the house. She says she rang the doorbell, but no one heard it. I find that hard to believe, but she says she tried to climb up to her room. But in Nancy's description of Paula, it looked like she was sneaking out, not into the house. Now about this time, Suzanne looks out the window at them and she asks what they're doing, and Nancy jokes that they're playing in the snow. They ask her to let them in, and Paula says Nancy needs to come inside to warm up and get some hot chocolate. So as they go up to the house, Nancy looks around and she sees no footprints of Paula's. She said she was sneaking into the house, so there would have been fresh footprints. So is she lying or telling the truth? Nancy also notices that the front door has a chain latch on it. There's no way the door could have locked behind Paula, as she told Nancy it did. Now when they're inside, Paula brushes off the whole incident. She changes the subject as she makes them all hot chocolate, and she talks about a time her brother, Hans, drove his motor scooter into a canal. She really does not want to talk about why she was on the roof, or about the shoplifting incident at the mall earlier, because when Nancy brings it up, she says she's tired. It is cool though, because we do get a reference to one of Nancy's past cases here. Paula asks Nancy what her spookiest case was, and Nancy says, probably when Bess and I went to Charleston, South Carolina. We stayed in an old mansion that looked like a set for a horror movie. She's talking about book number 97, The Mystery at Magnolia Mansion. I really enjoyed that book. I love when we get references to Nancy's past cases. But anyways, Nancy ends up leaving because it's well after midnight, but first she puts up the stepladder back in the garage. She also wants to check something. She reasons that if Paula had been sneaking back into the house, she would have had to stash her purse somewhere. So Nancy looks around the garage, and sure enough, she finds Paula's purse hidden in a trash can in the garage. Nancy pulls the purse out, but then she decides she can't snoop through it. I love when Nancy does this. Like, she will draw these imaginary lines. She's like, this is okay to do when I'm sleuthing. This is not okay. Like invading people's personal property. But then she'll do it anyway in some cases. It's kind of funny how certain mysteries, she sets aside her morality compass. She's like, this is okay in this instance, but not in this one. But as Nancy goes to put the purse back, fate intervenes and a green piece of paper falls out that has the number 7846 and the letters MT on it. So Nancy commits it to memory, and as she goes to leave, she sees a flicker at Paula's window, and she wonders if the girl was watching her. So the next day, Nancy goes over to the Moorleys because Suzanne and her mom asked her to. Miss Moorely says Paula is at cheerleading practice, so she won't overhear them, but they are both worried about her. Suzanne says she knows Paula was on the roof last night, and when Nancy says she locked herself out, Suzanne laughs meanly and says that isn't true. She says she peeked in Paula's room around that time and saw how she'd padded the bed, so it looked like she was sleeping in it. The good old Ferris Bueller trick. She probably stuffed a few pillows under the sheets, but I doubt she had snores on a sound machine going. But Miss Moorely says they try to respect Paula's privacy, but Suzanne gets upset that her mother isn't more mad at Paula and shows them a bank statement of Paula's she accidentally opened. Okay, whoa. Time out. This is crazy. The dynamics that are at play here. Suzanne is obviously jealous of Paula. That's where a lot of these suspicions, quote unquote, are coming from. She's really just jealous that Paula has better grades than her and Paula made the cheerleading squad and she didn't. We really don't have any reason to be suspicious of Paula right now. She stopped a shoplifter at the mall. Yes, so she was on the roof of the house the other night. But really, a lot of these suspicions are kind of unfounded. What happened to innocent until proven guilty? But Nancy notes that it would have been very hard for Suzanne to mistake Paula's mail for hers, and she thinks she did it on purpose. And she would be right. But according to this bank statement, because it's already open, so I guess it's free game, we get to look at this person's bank statement. Paula has withdrawn almost all of her money, which there's no crime there either. Now, I'm gonna let you in on a little secret because this is a Nancy Drew book. There is a mystery here. Just wait, we're getting to it. But as of right now, this is just crazy to me that we're opening people's mail, we're looking at their bank statements, and we really have no reason to be suspicious of them. Just hold that thought and we'll continue. So Miss Moorely says Paula's parents give her a generous allowance, over $400 a month, which is pretty good. I mean, she's overseas, so that makes sense. She would need a little extra spending money. But the book says Suzanne notes this part jealously. Of course she does, because Suzanne, her main character trait in this book is to just be jealous of Paula. I'm sorry, but that is what she is best at. Other than that, she's very two-dimensional to me, and she irks me. But Suzanne says the manager at Around the World also gives Paula clothes and jewelry. The Moorleys pay for Paula when they go do things together, so she shouldn't be spending on too much. But Suzanne says she did hear Paula make a phone call to her parents asking for more money. I mean, what is with this girl? She eavesdrops on her. She opens her bank statements. With friends like that. So Nancy next asks about the exchange program, and Suzanne's mom says she's talked to Larry Taylor, the coordinator. He told her sometimes the exchange students are homesick and also sad to leave America in the last few months before they go home, which could explain why Paula has been happy some days and sad other days. Or, it could have something to do with the fact that her host family is nice to her one minute and then suspects her of all these crimes she hasn't committed the next. I mean, call me crazy. But Miss Moorely does scold Suzanne when she keeps pushing about Paula and says she'll be right back with some brownies. At least somebody has some sense here. But Suzanne mutters that her mom thinks Paula is an angel, but she knows better. See, this is like when people are just determined to see the worst in somebody. I mean, I remember when people in high school would do this kind of stuff. I mean, which they are in high school in this book, so it kind of makes sense. But it's just childish. It's like, really, honestly, I think Suzanne needs some therapy. Like, we need to sit down and examine why she is so determined to find fault with Paula. So while Miss Moorely is gone, the phone rings and Suzanne answers it. She motions to Nancy and she covers the earpiece. She tells Nancy to go get on the extension. It's the guy who calls Paula, and she's going to pretend to be Paula to get some answers. So Suzanne answers and says it's Paula in Dutch, and then the voice on the other end of the line says, "You blew it. Now you'll really pay. And if you don't, the Moorleys will get a big surprise." Then they hang up. So Suzanne and Nancy talk in the hall, and Nancy says the voice sounded like it had a British or Irish accent. Now, okay, here, see, we're getting somewhere. This is suspicious. This is really the first suspicious thing that's happened, other than maybe Paula being on the roof of the house. So let's continue. So Nancy asks if any guys from school hang around Paula, and Suzanne says this guy, Sean Devane, who her parents think is bad news, likes to hang out with Paula. Now, about that time, Miss Moorely comes back in with brownies, and she asks who the phone call was for. Nancy explains, and then Miss Moorely seems worried. So Nancy asks to know everything they know about Paula, like where she goes, where she hangs out, and Miss Moorely says sometimes she goes to this place called Le Cafe after work. Suzanne says she goes with the cheerleaders, and she's never invited. Suzanne, let me ponder on that. I wonder why you weren't invited. Maybe because you have this green jealousy seeping out of your entire being. And, you're not a cheerleader. But Paula also works at the boutique 3 or 4 days a week, of course, and she goes in at 4 o'clock p.m. So Nancy kind of mentally takes a note of all these places that Paula likes to go. And as she goes to leave, Suzanne says she'll let her know if there's any more phone calls. Suzanne seems too eager to catch Paula doing things. Also, at this point, I was reading and I was like, why is Suzanne not at school? Like, maybe school lets out at 3 o'clock or so and she came home while Paula went to cheerleading practice after school? That's the only thing I can think of. But anyways, Nancy and Bess next drive to the school to see if they can catch Paula before she goes to the mall. And they see her with Sean Devane. And Sean and Paula, they seem to be arguing. So the girls watch Paula jump on a bus going downtown, and Sean follows it on his motorcycle for a while before going a different direction. While Nancy and Bess follow the bus, Bess says she had a class with Sean and he was smart, but he hung around a bad crowd. So Nancy and Bess see Paula eventually jump off the bus and go to the bank, then the post office. So Nancy parks and she goes to follow her. Paula is so distracted that she actually walks out in front of a car, which ends up honking at her. But Nancy goes into the post office behind her, and she ends up in line behind a woman wearing a parka and carrying a poodle, so Paula doesn't see her. Nancy tries to see around the woman, but her poodle, Fifi, snaps at her. But Nancy can tell that Paula is filling out a money order. So she watches the girl leave, and then she gets an idea. She goes to pet Fifi, and the dog acts exactly how she wants it to. It snarls and jumps out of its owner's arms, which scares the mail clerk, making them drop Paula's envelope. So Nancy is able to read it, and it says, "Care of Mr. and Miss Stephen Chester." So she memorizes the zip code and then leaves. When she gets back out on the sidewalk, there's no sign of Paula, but then she hears a muffled scream from an alley. Nancy runs around the corner, and she sees Paula laying in the alley, scared to death, and Sean Devane is leaning over her. So Nancy runs forward and tells him to stop or she'll call the police. Sean says he was just helping her up, and Nancy sees Paula look nervously back down the alley. Nancy thinks she hears retreating footsteps. Could someone else have scared and hurt Paula? But Paula tells them both she slipped in the snow, but Nancy notes there isn't any. It's a clear path. Besides, Paula is a cheerleader, and Nancy thinks to herself they're pretty coordinated. So Sean offers to drive Paula to work, but he has a motorcycle and her ankle is hurt, so Nancy insists on driving her. Sean leaves, but he tells Paula they need to talk soon. Now, as Nancy and Paula go back to Nancy's car, they see Bess coming out of a coffee shop with some donuts. They all get in the car, and Paula really doesn't want to talk to them. So Nancy asks Bess after they drop Paula off at work if she saw anyone suspicious around the post office, and Bess says she was too busy picking between jelly-filled or chocolate donuts. Oh, I love Bess so much. I mean, if Nancy had wanted her to do surveillance, she should have said so. But when they get back to Nancy's house, she calls information and she gets the phone number for the Chesters, and she finds out they live in Joliet, an hour away from River Heights. So Nancy's idea for talking to the Chesters is hilarious. She calls their phone number and she says she's with Telemarketing Incorporated and she wants to ask them about their favorite salad dressings. I mean, I can just picture it now. Nancy would probably give a false name, but she would be like, "Hello, I'm Jessica White and I'm with the Hidden Valley Ranch Corporation. We just want to take a poll and see what your favorite salad dressings might be today. Thousand Island? All right." What in the world? Oh my gosh. Smooth Nancy. Smooth. Smooth like Italian dressing. So Miss Chester answers the phone and she says they love salads and she and her husband eat them almost every night because they're on diets. Again, with the dieting culture. The 90s were truly horrible for that. I'm just going to throw that out there. But Nancy then goes on to ask her silly questions and says she's helping market some new ranch and creamy Italian dressings. And if she gets their address, she can send them some. So Miss Chester, being a lover of salads, gives her their address. Just like that. You know, I am pretty excited about the prospect of free samples also. But I don't think I would give my address to somebody just in order to get some. But that's just me. Also, the thought of salad dressings being shipped in the mail just sounds so disgusting to me. Like, I know that you can order it probably on Amazon now, but anyways, Nancy asks how many people are in the household, you know, for salad dressing purposes, and she's told 3. Mrs. Chester, her husband, and her son, plus one more, an exchange student named Neil from Ireland. So Nancy says she hopes Neil will love the salad dressing, says they'll get it in 3 weeks, and then hangs up. Oh my gosh, that was so funny. So next, Nancy calls the Moorleys line, but it's busy, so she drives over there. She says she'll take Bess home, and on the way out, she sees Hannah left a note saying she's playing bridge at the Oswalds, and she made Nancy a sandwich. I love that Hannah is so caring and sweet towards Nancy. Like, she knows that Nancy is usually too busy to think to eat, so she made her a sandwich. So Nancy and Bess split it in the car on the way to the Marvin's house. Now, after dropping Bess off, Nancy has to get over for a fire truck, and she sees it's going to the Moorleys' house, and it's on fire. So Nancy asks a fireman if anyone was hurt, and he says no, everyone got out in time. The fire was also contained to the basement. Suzanne is in the front yard, and she sees Nancy and runs over to her, and she angrily says Paula isn't home and seems intent on blaming her for everything. Excuse me, what? You're seriously going to blame this innocent exchange student for your house catching on fire? No, ma'am. We're not going to make Paula the scapegoat for all of your inadequacies. So Nancy reasons with Suzanne, and she says Paula is in serious danger, and then Suzanne changes her tune. She admits to locking Paula out to get her in trouble the other night, and they go over to talk to Mr. and Miss Moorely. Mr. Moorely says the fire chief found gas-soaked rags near the furnace in the basement, but he says none of them would have been so careless. Mr. Moorely also says they did have workmen in the house not long ago when the house was painted. So Nancy tells them she'll tell the fire chief about Paula's threatening phone call, and Suzanne says Nancy's a detective and has solved a lot of cases. Now, about this time, Paula shows up and she's in shock. She runs over to check on everyone and she asks if they're okay. A medic comes up and says they need to go to the hospital for smoke inhalation. Furniture, Suzanne's old doll carriage, and charred books are brought up from the basement and tossed in the snow. And the Moorleys head off to go to the hospital, but Paula lingers for a moment and throws a crumpled piece of paper on top of the pile of smoking things, then walks away. Nancy quickly kicks it into the snow to salvage it and see what it says. So she goes off to the side to try to make out what the note says, and the address and signature are singed off and she can only make out certain words. The note says, Inez, whose home is Essen, Germany, wishes to visit. Also, please remember to go to. Drive up to New York was. Wishes to thank Pablo. Will not be able to smoke. It looks like a newsletter for the exchange program, so why was Paula burning it? Okay, now this is a little bit sus. But Nancy walks around the house to see how someone got in, and she sees how a glass cutter was used on a window. Now, while she's checking it out, she hears footsteps and she hides in the bushes. A flashlight shines in her eyes and someone pulls her out of the bushes. And it's Officer Brody, a rookie cop from the book A Secret in Time. We mentioned him a little bit earlier. But he asks what Nancy is doing there, and she asks what he's doing, skulking around in civilian clothes and not his police uniform. He tells Nancy he's investigating, and she shows him the hole in the window. So she asks about the fire, and Officer Brody says the rags that started the fire were made into a torch. He tells Nancy that homeowners are always suspected first in cases of arson. As the daughter of a fireman, I can confirm that is true. You always gotta look into those insurance policies. But Nancy also tells him about the threatening phone call and asks him to tell her if the insurance company comes up with anything. He escorts her back to the front yard and he mockingly calls her Detective Drew and tells her to run along like a good girl and leave the rest of the investigation to a real police officer. Psh, in name only. So Nancy goes back to her car, but she notices someone in a red sports car across the street watching the Moorleys' house. So she goes over to talk to the person, and it's the guy who was following Paula at the mall the other day. The man looks scared and takes off, his car shooting up snow that covers Nancy head to toe. So Nancy's freezing, so she drives home, and according to the book, it's 10 p.m. Carson ushers her in when he sees she's soaked and says Hannah made some chicken soup. Okay, now does anyone else remember, if you were born in the early 90s, maybe late 80s, this Campbell's chicken noodle soup commercial? Because this is a core memory for me, but in the commercial, you see a snowman at the table, the parent brings over some chicken noodle soup, and then the snowman eats it and turns into this freckle-faced kid. It always used to make me laugh, but I imagine that's what Nancy must have felt like thawing out and eating some of Hannah's chicken soup, which I would love to have the recipe for, by the way. But Nancy looks at the note Paula tried to burn at the scene of the fire, and she sees with her magnifying glass that some words are circled, and it forms a message. Home, go up, smoke. Well, that's not good. Looks like Paula might have had a little bit of a pre-warning as to the Moorleys' house burning down. Plus, there was that threatening phone call that Suzanne and Nancy intercepted. So Nancy calls Miss Moorely the next morning and she gets the number for Mr. Taylor, the exchange program coordinator. She acts enthusiastic about the program and she's able to find out Neil's last name, which is Galligan. So Mr. Taylor invites Nancy to a get-together for the students that's coming up. When Nancy hangs up, Bess shows up as she's pulling together lunch for them and Suzanne. Nancy had Bess go over to Le Cafe where Paula hangs out, and Bess says Nancy owes her $15 for breakfast and tipping the waiter extra to get information. Bess says she found out Paula hangs out with a motorcycle rider there a lot, and last Friday they got into an argument. Sounds a lot like Sean Devane, and Nancy and Bess have already seen them having an argument. So Suzanne shows up shortly after this, and they chat and have lunch, and she says she overheard Paula talking to Sean and saying something about more money. So Nancy, Suzanne, and Bess hang around outside the school to see where Paula goes. They see her come out with Sean carrying her guitar case. Suzanne says that's weird because Paula didn't say anything about needing it for school. So Paula gives Sean the guitar case and goes to get on the bus, and Sean speeds off on his motorcycle. So the girls end up following him. He leads them to a pawn shop, and it looks like Sean is going to pawn Paula's guitar. So the book says it's not the best part of town, but Nancy gets out to watch through the window. Sean gets a green ticket back, just like the one Nancy found in Paula's purse. So when Sean turns to leave, Nancy has to hide, so she ducks into a telephone booth and pulls her hood up. She pretends to make a call even though there's just a silver cord and no phone receiver. And Sean stalks off, gets on his motorcycle, and leaves. So after the coast is clear and he's gone, Nancy, Bess, and Suzanne go in the pawn shop, and Nancy plays her part very convincingly. She pretends to be embarrassed to be seen there, and she says she lost her claim ticket, but asks if the owner can look up the items she sold with just the number. So he does, and he brings out a box with 2 gold chains. One has a tulip pendant on it. He says he knows he gave her $300 for it last time, but the price has gone up and it's $400 now. Nancy says that's robbery. Pete, the pawn shop owner, says to take it or leave it. He says he knows rich girls can always find the dough. So Nancy says they'll be back and they leave. Suzanne says she recognizes the tulip necklace as Paula's. Bess wonders if she could be stealing jewelry from the boutique and pawning it, but Suzanne says she wouldn't do that. So now Suzanne is slowly coming around and is on Paula's side. Finally. But the girls decide to invite Paula to dinner and talk to her. Suzanne calls Paula to invite her and her mom to get an excuse for school. Okay, well at least that answers that question, because I was like, Suzanne is supposed to be in school right now. So later at the mall, 15 minutes have gone by and Paula hasn't shown up. Nancy and Suzanne go to the boutique and Bess stays at their meeting spot at the fountain. When Nancy and Suzanne get to the store, they don't see Paula, and Miss Hunt tells them Paula felt sick around 4:30 and went home early. Suzanne invited her to dinner at 4:15. So Nancy and Suzanne leave the store, and Nancy says it's possible Paula was feeling bad. Maybe she went back to the hotel the Moorleys have been staying at since the fire. But while they're walking away, Nancy spots the dark-haired guy who's been stalking Paula. She pretends to be a window shopper, and then she gets right next to him and grabs him by the wrist. Nancy says she knows he's Paula's friend and he tries to get away, but she tells him he has nothing to worry about, unless he isn't a friend, in which case she'll call security. Suzanne comes up asking if he's the blackmailer, and then the guy gets away. Nancy's able to catch up to him at the escalator and grabs for him. They tussle, and she starts to fall down the escalator. That's a new one. Death by maul. But at the last second, the guy grabs her to prevent Nancy from falling. Then he vaults over the side of the escalator and gets away. Okay, so he might be a bad guy, but he has a conscience. Who knows, maybe it's all just miscommunication. But why he would run from Nancy, I don't know. Now next, the girls find Bess and they go to the Moorleys' house because Suzanne says her mom is there with the painters. Miss Moorely says Paula came by at 5 o'clock and said she was going to stay over at Amy, the head cheerleader's house. Something about a surprise party. But Amy didn't pick Paula up, she took the bus, so she could be lying. So Suzanne calls Amy's house, but Amy says Paula isn't there and she doesn't know anything about a party. So Paula did lie. Where is she? Hiding from someone? So everyone is worried, but Nancy is like, we'll have to wait 24 hours before filing a police report. So they wait, and then they end up filing a police report. So Nancy and Bess go to the Moorleys the next day and they call all the cheerleaders, but none of them know where Paula is. Then they decide to search her room. Nancy finds a letter in one of Paula's shoes while Suzanne is distracted by some love letters. Again, Suzanne is a little bit too obsessed with Paula for my taste. Like, she's reading her love letters now. Something tells me Suzanne wants to be Paula. And I mean, we could argue that Suzanne is just trying to help find Paula, but you know that she would be reading these love letters if she was trying to help Paula or not. That's what makes it kind of creepy. But the letter that Nancy found is in Dutch. When they translate it, they realize Paula was in trouble for shoplifting back home. Nancy also finds some more newsletters for the exchange program, and when she looks for the circled letters, one message is, "You're behind in your obligation. Interest rising." And the other Nancy comes up with is, "Send kids Sheila on known address," which doesn't make any sense. So Nancy tries again and gets the correct message. "This Saturday, last chance. Be there or else." So Nancy says she'll take Bess home after this, and she and Suzanne have a party to go to, the one for the exchange student program. So later, as Nancy is putting her shoes on for the party, she hears someone at the door and she goes to answer it. And it's Mr. Taylor, the coordinator for the foreign exchange program. He says he was out that way, so he thought he would give Nancy a packet with information about the program, since he was afraid he'd get too busy at the party and not get a chance to. He says all the kids in the program are so good, and Nancy blurts, "Even Paula de Jaeger?" Mr. Taylor says yes, and then he looks concerned and asks if everything is okay. Nancy says she's just worried about Paula and doesn't know if she'll be showing up to the party. Mr. Taylor says he has talked to Miss Moorely and asks what's going on, but Nancy is cautious. Maybe Paula didn't trust Mr. Taylor? There's definitely someone she doesn't trust. but Mr. Taylor says he'll stop by the Moorleys before the party. Now, at the party, Nancy and Suzanne divide and conquer. Their goal is to find out who Neil Galligan is. So Nancy strikes up a conversation with a girl named Ellen, who is hosting a girl named Angelina from Portugal. Nancy asks if she's ran into Neil lately, and Ellen says, "Oh, the handsome Irish guy." And Nancy fishes for what he looks like by saying he dyed his hair green and started wearing blue contact lenses. And Ellen says, "No, he has wavy black hair and green eyes." Nancy casually asks if he was wearing his blue ski jacket, and Ellen says yes. So the guy in the ski jacket who was following Paula at the mall must be Neil. Nancy also wonders if maybe Neil might have roped Paula into shoplifting and he was hanging around outside the boutique while the girl tried to steal jewelry and Paula caught her the other day. Or maybe Paula had a change of heart? Nancy thinks Neil must be threatening Paula to go through with something Saturday, but what? Now, while Nancy's looking out one of the restaurant windows, she suddenly sees Neil's face. So she flings open the door and goes after him. She notes that Neil is stepping in other people's tracks, so he's harder to track. Very smart. But Nancy follows some footprints down to the lake and looks around, but he's not there. All of a sudden, though, Nancy gets shoved in the back and falls on the frozen surface of the lake. So this is from the cover of the book, this scene. Nancy is wearing dress clothes, of course, because she was going to this party, and she doesn't have her coat on. And the ice under Nancy starts to crack. She yells for help, but the ice keeps cracking as she tries to crawl back to shore. And the person who pushed her is gone, and she didn't see who it was. Thankfully, though, someone comes along to help Nancy. She hears a guy's voice saying, "Grab this." They fling their jacket out so Nancy can grab the other sleeve and pull her to shore. And it's Sean Devane, resident macho bad guy who wears leather jackets and drives a motorcycle. He helps Nancy inside the restaurant, and Nancy goes into the bathroom to try and dry off under the hand dryers. When she comes out, Sean has a hot chocolate waiting for her. Okay, Nancy owes him an apology, and everyone else does that has said he's a bad guy. You shouldn't always judge a book by its cover. But Nancy is cautiously thankful. She wonders if Sean could have pushed her and then came back to rescue her so she wouldn't suspect him, or did someone else entirely push her? So Nancy and Sean sit down to talk, and he says he was Paula's date for tonight, but he doesn't know where she is. And Nancy tells him about being pushed onto the surface of the lake. She also says she thinks Paula is being blackmailed. Now, while they're having this conversation, suddenly Sean grabs Nancy's arm and shoves her head under the table, trying to hide her, but Nancy thinks he's trying to hurt her. After a minute or two of struggling, he releases her and tells Nancy he's pretty sure he saw the blackmailer go into the exchange student party, a guy with dark hair. Sean says he saw the guy meet Paula at a diner outside of town and they got into an argument. So Nancy guesses correctly that Sean helped Paula raise money, and he says yes, Paula told him she was trying to help a friend in the Netherlands. He followed her and found her near the post office that day, the day Nancy found them. He says Paula has helped him a lot. He's not the best student and he wants to help find her. So Nancy leaves a note for Suzanne and tells her to get a ride home, and she and Sean leave in his white car. Sean decides to drive them back to the diner on the hunch that Paula may be there again, and she is. They pull into a spot and they see a red car race up and Neil gets out. But now, Sean isn't so sure that's the guy he saw Paula with the other night. In any case, Paula seems happy to see Neil. And Paula wouldn't be happy to see her blackmailer. So Nancy and Sean sneak in and get in the next booth with a high partition beside Neil and Paula's, and they don't see them. They overhear some snippets of conversation like, "Can't take it anymore," "No more blackmailing," "Fire was the last straw," and "Got to get him so he can't do this to anyone else." And Nancy realizes all of a sudden who they're talking about. So she looks over the booth and says she wants to help them stop Larry Taylor too. Neil is about to leave when Nancy and Paula encourage him to stay. He seems distrustful of Nancy and is really curt with her, but Sean says he wants to help also. He says Mr. Taylor pushed Nancy, but Nancy says she isn't 100% sure and asks where Neil went after she saw him. He gets mad and says he didn't push her, so Nancy asks them to tell her everything. Paula says at first Mr. Taylor wanted just money. Then he wanted Paula and some of the other students to do things for him. This is already giving me the ick. Nancy tells about the shoplifting she got in trouble for, and Paula blushes. Paula says Mr. Taylor told her he was going to arrange a shoplifting incident at the boutique to make her look guilty. He knew about her previous history. That night, Nancy saw Babette come in the store, another student that Mr. Taylor was using. Paula caught Babette, and Mr. Taylor was furious. He was the one who pushed Paula down near the post office. Neil also says Mr. Taylor made him collect the money and write the threatening notes to Paula. Wow, Mr. Taylor is despicable. But Neil says he was being blackmailed about arson he was suspected of back in Ireland. Nancy tells them she believes them, and she also tells them how Mr. Taylor slipped up when she last talked to him. When he came to the Moorleys, he'd told Nancy he'd recognized their bright yellow house, and he hadn't been there since August. Well, in August, the house was gray, according to Suzanne, and the only way he'd know that is if he'd been there the night of the fire. Paula says Mr. Taylor wants her to slip out some gold and diamond jewelry from the boutique the next day and bring them to him in the parking lot. If she doesn't, he'll make it look like Sean was her partner, an accomplice to her shoplifting. Sean admits he had a charge of breaking and entering last year, so it wouldn't look good for either of them. So Nancy asks if she can borrow Paula's hat and coat and slips away to the bathroom. When she comes back, she puts Paula's purse on her shoulder, and everyone agrees she looks like Paula enough that Mr. Taylor shouldn't know the difference. Nancy says she'll take him the fake jewels and tell the police what's going on. So Paula goes to a phone booth and she calls Le Cafe and asks to talk to Mr. Taylor. He tells her to meet him in the parking lot at 9 o'clock p.m. and look for a blue car, and there better not be any policemen or he'll burn the Moorleys' house down with them in it. This guy is sick. Who extorts kids like this? But Paula is worried about Mr. Taylor finding out they included the police, but Nancy says it will all be okay. She says she'll also borrow jewelry from Bess, too, for the ruse. Neil says Paula needs to help Nancy with a Dutch accent, though, if they want to be really convincing. So on Saturday, the plan is set into motion. Nancy has borrowed an outfit from Paula and braided her hair like her, and Bess and Suzanne are dressed like socialite shoppers wearing darker colored wigs, lots of makeup, and carrying shopping bags. Nancy wants them to witness the handoff. Sean is dressed like a janitor and even cut his longer hair short. He's committed to the bit, and he must really like Paula. Nancy tells him to act like he's emptying the trash in the parking garage, and she says cops will also be positioned in the garage and dressed as plainclothes detectives. Paula is going to meet Neil behind the boutique and get in a car with Chief McGinnis while Nancy makes the switch. Miss Hunt, the boutique owner, is also in on it. So Nancy is about to get on the elevator to the parking garage when she feels a gun at her back, and she's told there's a change of plans. Mr. Taylor tells her to push the button for floor 2, so she does, but he hasn't realized she's not Paula yet. He leads her to a green car, and Nancy's heart drops. The police are supposed to be looking for a blue one, and he examines the jewelry. He quickly realizes it's fake and grabs at Nancy's hat and parka hood and sees who she is. So he forces her into the car at gunpoint, but Nancy unlocks the door with her fingers once inside when he isn't looking. Now, meanwhile, Sean races after them in his car. They're doing this high-speed chase through this parking garage, and Nancy flings the door open and rolls out. And somehow, Sean goes up the wrong way in the garage and drives straight for Taylor, playing chicken. Taylor swerves and at the last moment hits a support pole. He's arrested, Bess gets her jewelry back, and Mr. Taylor is found guilty of setting fire to the Moorleys' house, and Carson says they'll get him on blackmail and kidnapping also. And that's the end of this book. Now I'll go on to a little segment that I like to call What's Cookin'. So in this book, we had mentionings of popcorn, croissants, omelets, pizza, tortellini, hot chocolate, yogurt and potato salad, monster banana split, I'm just trying to picture what that looks like, double dip cones, brownies, turkey sandwich on rye, donuts, juice, soda, hamburgers, chicken soup, and tea. Now we'll go on to a little segment that I like to call Add That to Your Resume. So the things that I said Nancy could add to her resume for this mystery salad dressing saleswoman, she went to some crazy lengths to get people's addresses and pretended to sell salad dressing. And I put that escalated fast. I've never seen Nancy fall down an escalator before in a mystery, so that was a first. Now really quickly, let's talk about the things I liked and the things I didn't like about The Stranger in the Shadows. So the things I liked, there was a really surprising villain for this one. I wouldn't say that I liked him or his methods. Really all the villains are bad, but it surprised me. But for the things I didn't like the extortion. That was just horrible. This guy, this grown adult, blackmailing these kids. And I also didn't like Suzanne, honestly. Suzanne got on my nerves so much in this book. I was like, you are so jealous of Paula. It's really messed up. I also really missed Ned and George. They weren't in this book, and I kind of wish they had been. But when it comes to giving this book a rating, I would give it a 2.5 magnifying glass rating. It was okay. There were parts of it that were really enjoyable. It's not a higher ranked mystery for me, but it was still fairly enjoyable to read. So that concludes this week's episode of the podcast. I hope you guys enjoyed it. For next week's episode, we're going to jump into the very next book, The Mystery of the Jade Tiger. So if you like mysteries that are set in California, this is another book that's set out that way, and books that deal with art galleries and heists, and surprisingly enough, the Vietnam War, then you're going to enjoy this one. Until next time. Thank you for listening to this episode of True Drew Podcast. Can't get enough of the podcast? Then check out my subscription series, True Drew Files, available on Apple and Spotify. For Nancy Drew books and merchandise, you can check out my website, www.truedrewpodcast.com. For business inquiries, you can contact me at truedrewpodcast@gmail.com, or you can connect with me on Instagram at True Drew Podcast.